Hey everybody, welcome to the very first episode of the Quo Vadis podcast. And that is a Catholic podcast that will help you to begin with the end in mind. We're going to explain what that means just a little bit here. But first, I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering who the heck we even are. And that's a great question. So first of all, I'll start. My name is Taylor Geiger. I am the vocation coordinator for the Diocese of Green Bay. I consider myself, hopefully other people do too, to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. I am 27 years old. Years young, I suppose, if you want to be one of those people, right as of right now, which is exciting. But I've been involved in the church since I was in high school. And I now am in charge of helping young men pray and discern with their vocation. And joining me is my podcasting partner, a good friend of mine, the godfather to my daughter, and I suppose also technically my boss, but that's not really here now, is Father Mark Mleziva.
Well, I approve your days off, so I think that probably goes towards something.
Is that a weird power move? Seeing someone's future in front of your hands of oh, you want this day off, dude?
I kind of picture like the gladiator, like the thumb up and down. Like, what do? Do I
right
give him the day off? Do I give him it off? Like up, down? I always give you the time. Good morning, everyone, or good day, wherever you might be. Yeah, my name is Father Mark Mleziva. I'm the vocation director for the diocese. My role primarily is to help young people know what the Lord is calling them to do with their life. The word vocation comes from the Latin verb vocare, which means to call, as well as the chaplain at St. Mary Catholic High School down in Neenah/Menasha/Fox Crossing. Go Zephyrs. But yeah, great joy to be with you to begin this podcast. We are pioneering today. I think you can use as a verb, I believe, pioneering.
I hope so.
Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we are pioneering. Yeah, this is our first ever attempt at a podcast. So here's how this kind of got started, the idea of all of this. And Father Mark loves this. So Father Mark and I met back when I was working at Roncalli High School in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So we are in the Green Bay Diocese. I don't know if we mentioned that or not. I think we did. But back in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where I was working at Roncalli High School, I was the campus minister, and Father Mark jumped in to be our chaplain. Right as you're a little baby priest. You were just ordained.
I was just ordained. Yes, I was.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It was.
That was nice. And so Father Mark and I started working together in that capacity, and then we started just kind of developing a friendship from there. But we went on several trips together. Steubenville trips and a couple other things. And more often than not, we ended up being roomies, but also sitting next to each other on the buses and that kind of stuff. And we just had conversations about anything and everything from that point, especially when it came to the faith or whatever it was. And I kind of joked with them about how we started a podcast because we had a lot to say, I've never been accused of not having anything to say. I do speak a lot. So I feel like you're not saying anything to drive that point home. That was mean.
Well, you're telling the story of the genesis of this. I've got a different take on it, I guess.
Do you?
But if you want to keep going, I'm not sure if you were done or not.
No, I would love to hear your take.
Okay, so priests in the Catholic Church are not married. Therefore, they don't have children, right?
In the Latin rite of the
In the
church.
Latin rite, correct. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shout out to the Easterns.
But there's the beginning of this sort of made me feel like I had a child because I had this campus minister by the name of Taylor Geiger. You can kind of picture the scene, right? So you got this little kid. They're at the grocery store. They want the Oreos. And the mom is like, no, you can't have the Oreos, right? And they keep going back like, Mom. And, they start crying and they start throwing a fit. And, the mom holds firm, right? Because they don't need the Oreos. Nothing against them, but, that's a judgment call. So Taylor was this little kid with the Oreos coming up to me for many, many months and years saying, hey, we got to do a podcast. I'm like, yeah, I just, all right. So I started giving him little steps along the way. And sure enough, he started crossing these off the list. So here we are. But that's kind of the image I have in my mind is you just a little kid just kind of tugging, hey.
Unbelievable.
Hey.
No.
So that's how it is in my mind.
You're remembering this incorrectly. So for what it's worth. So anyway, as we talked about doing a podcast, I started talking about the different ideas and throwing around different titles in my mind and what we even talk about, right? We could do one just for fun where you and I just banter about anything and everything we want to. But then I started thinking about, okay, so Father Mark is the vocation director for the diocese, which means obviously he's in charge of helping to form and find young men and like discern with them and pray with them and lead them. And then I left my position at Roncalli in July to work with Father Mark to be the vocation coordinator. So I thought, okay, so the idea of vocation, so where is vocation supposed to be taking us, right? That has been a very popular word in the Catholic world, at least since I've been in high school, right? This idea of like, you need to pray about your vocation, which is a really good thing. I think a lot of times it can be misunderstood as like what job do you want to do when later in life? It can also be misunderstood to mean God is clearly, going to say to you these things, and then you're going to do them, as opposed to it being a kind of a longer process, and one that also involves a deep relationship with God, but is also very much so helped by having a deep relationship with other people in your life, like by people who are willing to walk with you, to pray with you, and to help you understand where God might be leading you. And so that kind of led us then to this, and then when I was working at Roncalli, I had an intern who introduced me to the concept, I don't know the concept or the phrase Quo Vadis. I never heard it before. So let's dive into that. So Quo Vadis is a Latin phrase, which means, where are you going? And the story comes not from scripture, but from a legend, where St. Peter is in Rome. He knows he's going to be killed, and so he is fleeing Rome to, again, this isn't canon, this is just a legend, this is just a story. He's fleeing Rome to avoid this persecution and death, and on his way out of Rome, he encounters the risen Lord, who is carrying a cross, and he says to him, Domine Quo Vadis, which means, Lord, where are you going? And then the Lord responds, I'm going to Rome to be crucified again. And Peter, then in that moment, kind of saw his own cowardice to a certain degree in that, but also then knew that he was called to live a life like the Lord. So he turned around and went back to Rome. And Father, you told me you were actually at that church?
I was, yeah. It's on the outside of Rome, on the outskirts. There's a beautiful tradition. It's called the 7 Church Walk that was started by St. Philip Neri. And he used to do this 7 church walk in preparation for big feast days. I'll rattle them off real quick. St. Peter's, we know St. Paul outside the walls. St. John Lateran, St. Mary Major, St. Sebastian, the Church of the Holy Cross, and last but not least, I'm blanking now.
No, man.
Yeah, this is going to look really poor for years to come.
Did you come to it? You got
St. Lawrence.
Oh,
St. Lawrence.
Hey, that's my middle name.
I know it is.
Oh, is that how you remembered it? You're like, oh, it's Taylor's middle name.
No, but I should have.
Nope.
I should have
All right.
sooner. But
Cool.
Nevertheless, I digress. But along this way, you go past the church, and it's a tiny little church. It's beautiful, and in there, as you walk in, there's this marble slab, okay, and there's footprints in the marble slab. Well, you think, well, that's kind of difficult to do to somebody to sculpt footprints into marble. And the story is that it was Jesus' own footprints, and then they put in that church. So once again, this is
the footprints where he encountered Peter.
Yeah,
Is that what,
yeah,
oh, cool.
yeah. So it's legend, of course, but you can see these, and like I said, it's this quaint little church. But you go up past it on the 7 church walk. So that's where I've seen it. So I've gone in and prayed.
And I think that, so the reason why we chose Quo Vadis then is that the reason why this story speaks then to the spiritual life and to vocation and discernment and all that kind of stuff is that all too often we don't ask ourselves that question, like, where are we going, right? Like, what's the end of all of this? And I think that happens because, and I'm guilty of this too, our minds are very short-term oriented, right? Like, the question you'll get asked when you want a job is, what's your 5-year goal? What's your 5-year plan, right? Or when you want to go to college, you choose something for 4 years. What happens is when it comes to spiritual life, we kind of go from one experience to the next, or we're seeking that next experience, as opposed to keeping the end of the spiritual life in mind. So the question of where are you going then with this whole spiritual journey? And so the answer then has to lie in the idea of universal vocation. So that's kind of how we're going to tie vocation to all this. We're not just going to talk about the priesthood. We're not just going to talk about the religious life or married life, that kind of stuff, but we want to help you grow in holiness, because that is the end goal. That is the end. And so there's actually a quote here from Lumen Gentium, which came from Vatican Council II, and it reads as this. I'm just going to read it to you guys. It's from verse 39. The church whose mystery is being set forth by the sacred synod is believed to be indefectibly holy. Indeed, Christ, the Son of God, who with the Father and the Spirit is praised as uniquely holy, loved the church as his bride, delivering himself up for her. He did this that he might sanctify her. He united her to himself as his own body and brought it to perfection by the gift of the Holy Spirit for God's glory. And this is the important part. Therefore, in the church, everyone, whether belonging to the hierarchy, so bishops and priests, or being cared for by it, so all of us, is called to holiness, according to the saying of the apostle, for this is the will of God, your sanctification. So we're called to be holy. That is the universal vocation of every single person, not only in this world, but especially in the church, is that is your end. So when you're asked, where are you going? The end has to be, I'm going toward heaven, because heaven equals holiness, because nothing that's not holy can enter heaven, right? So you are called to be holy. And so as we're asking this question, Quo Vadis, where are you going? We want to have conversations about what that means to be holy. And so I figured it would be kind of a fun thing to do just quickly is if I ask Father Mark, what is holiness? Like, how would you define holiness? If someone came to you and said, Father, I want to be holy, but what does that mean? What is it?
I would say holiness is following the will of God. Kind of short, sweet, and to the point. Because if you're following God's will, his will for you, as we know, is holiness, is to become a saint. So I would say, that's what I would say, is following God's will. And you think about that, I mean, it's an easy thing to say. Obviously, it's a hard thing to do. But how many times do you pray the Our Father in a day? You know, if you pray the rosary, you go to Mass, you do the Liturgy of the Hours, you pray a couple of times, right? But the line that always sticks out to me the most in the Our Father is, thy will be done. Like I said, just a few words, easy to say, but it's a hard thing to do. But if we're truly striving to do God's will, to know God's will, which he reveals to us through prayer, through others, that's what's going to put us on the path to heaven. And as you talked about, you know, is to become a saint, to be to heaven. A couple weeks back, we celebrate All Saints Day. And I was actually preaching on, it was a beautiful quote I came across. I'm not sure where. I'm not going to take credit for it. But there was an author, Leon Bloy. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong because he's French. So it's Léon.
French.
Léon Bloy.
Oui, oui.
So, but in this book, I want to say it was called The Poor Woman. This beautiful line, sort of how he ends it. The story of this woman, she struggled with everything. Struggled as a child. Parents were not kind to her. Marriage was not good. Found herself on the street in Paris, France. And I didn't read the whole story. It's sort of a synopsis. But this line that really stuck out was this. It says, the only real sadness, the only real failure, the only great tragedy in life is to not become a saint. Let's just say that one more time. The only real sadness, the only real failure, the only great tragedy in life is not to become a saint. Because if we don't become a saint, then we fell short of what God has called us to be and where he wants us to be. Now, he can't make this happen. Obviously, it takes our cooperation. But like as Taylor said many times, this is meant to be a help. This is meant to be an aid in striving for holiness to become a saint. Whether we're recognized or not, we're shooting for heaven. We're shooting for heaven. So, excited to begin this endeavor.
Fun fact, that's actually my Instagram bio, that quote you just read.
Is it?
It is.
Did you know that was from Léon?
No.
Okay. You totally ripped it off. Sinner.
I heard that quote. You want to know where I first heard that quote ironically from? Was from Stephen Colbert. Okay. Yeah, the late night host. Yeah, so he was talking about his dad and how his dad would read these French philosophers and like these French writers, and that was one of the quotes that always stuck with him. And I heard that, I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. Like the sense of like that's really the only sadness in life. And like part of that actually is interesting because I was going to bring this up, and I will now. That I'm currently right now working out on my master's degree through the Augustine Institute. Shout out to them. If you guys want to sponsor the show, you hit me up. That'd be great. Or sponsor my tuition. But I mean, I guess both would be good. I don't think they sponsor tuition. I think the point is that I pay them to learn. Anyway, so the classman right now is on moral and spiritual theology, and part of the big kind of a key theme of it is helping people to redefine what happiness means to them, because a lot of times happiness kind of comes down to the sense of like temporal happiness. Like I want to feel happy feelings in this moment and like now. But the professor's argument, which I think is a good one, is that the real happiness is to be one with God, is to have that beatific vision, is the fancy word for it, right? This idea of seeing God face to face, of being with him. And this is the beginning of Advent, so it's kind of a good time to even talk about that. But that quote speaks that the only real sadness is to not, I don't want to say achieve, that kind of reduced it a little bit, but achieve the real happiness of being with God forever, of being a saint, of doing God's will and doing it so as perfectly as you possibly can. So something very much so to that I think for those people who are listening to this, as you're listening to this and you're wondering, okay, so then what am I going to do with all of this? Well, honestly, we want to be able to have people on this show, have conversations, topics, that kind of stuff, that's going to just help you grow slowly in your faith. We want to be able to present you with topics, with different people, different stories that are going to speak to where you're at. I've been to a lot of conferences growing up, like Life Team conferences and Steubenville conferences. And there's always like a couple of different speakers who like their story for whatever reason just resonates with you, and that's part of what we want to do on this show as well. But most of all is we want to help you grow in holiness just by the conversation we're going to have. I know I've listened to a lot of podcasts on my own, and a lot of times the things that a host just kind of says in a passing thing is like, wow, that was profound, or wow, that stuck with me right now, And I don't know if that'll happen with anything Father Mark says, but it'll be happening something I say, I'm sure, right?
We'll dub some good wisdom in. That's the beauty of technology. We can just go back and like, hey.
It'll sound like so robotic, It'll be like right in the middle of a show, and all of a sudden someone's like, and now we're going to talk about this. It's so fake or something. That'd be hilarious. But yeah, so that's kind of the goal of this show. We want to be able to do all of those things with you guys and just pray with you and talk with you and be able to offer any kind of wisdom we have to offer if we have anything at all. So that's kind of the goal of this. That's the Quo Vadis story. And the Quo Vadis concept has come up a lot, actually, in Father Mark and I's relationship. So him and I, a couple of years ago now, back in like March, I think it was, like 2 years ago, last year?
Yep. No, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, we took a trip
so
together.
Old, you don't even remember.
We took a trip together to go to Notre Dame, like the University of Notre Dame, because I'd always wanted to go to that campus. I've seen pictures, looks beautiful, and Father Mark had never been there either. And I'm like, let's take a bro trip. That'd be so much fun. So we decided to take a little bro trip together to Notre Dame. And so we went over, I think it was like Ron Colley had like their spring break or something like that, So I think that's how we kind of timed it out, was to go around that time. And so we took a little trip together, and the first thing that Father Mark critiqued me for, like the very first thing, was me using my GPS on my phone to get us to Notre Dame, which is like the perfectly normal human thing to do nowadays, is to pull up your phone, type in the address, hit start on Google Maps, put your phone up in your car, and drive. And I think we were
Wrong.
I think we were going through Chicago, and I was like looking at my phone, and you were like trying to take a nap or something like that. And you woke up and you're like, "What are you doing? Just follow the signs. Just follow the signs, Taylor. Just go. Where are we going? Where are we going, Taylor?" And I'm like, "Well, we're going to Notre Dame." "Yeah, right. And what direction is that right now?" I'm like, "Well, we need to go east right now." Like, that's right. So follow the signs for east. Get all mad, and then we were finally on campus, and randomly, because now this became a topic of conversation. Randomly, he would just say to me, "Hey Taylor, what direction are we going right now?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. Who knows that? That's not a thing people just know. Like, oh, I happen to be going southwest right now at a 14-degree angle. Like, no one knows that." And he's like, "Oh, we're going east, you idiot." So
I don't recall if I threw in the idiot. I don't doubt that it happened.
I heard that in my head, at least. I heard that.
It could be. But no, this is so. I guess you gave your age before for whatever reason, so I guess I'll give mine now. I'm 33. It's my Jesus year.
Ooh.
And but I'm an old soul. I'm an old fogey. Like
it's so true. It's so true.
I make my bed every morning.
Doesn't make you old.
I wash my dishes by hand.
Not in some dishwasher.
Not in some dishwasher.
Like some modern
I've never started a dishwasher. I lied, actually. When I was in high school, I worked at at a restaurant they had a dishwasher. Anyway,
I would hope so.
but I just like to know where I'm going. So I look at the map. I look at the map ahead of time. So just in case, for whatever reason, my phone would be struck by lightning and I would not have technology, I would still know how to get home or get to my destination, where I feel like we've become this I'm an old fogey here because I'm just ranting about like people of this generation, they don't even know what direction they're going. Like if look at the sun, you know, they don't even know. So it was my way of training my young Padawan over here to know, like, hey, we gotta go to Notre Dame. That's in Indiana. That's east of here. We got to keep going east. And when we go home, guess what? You go the other way.
You go west.
You go west. And then north, of course. So I pride myself, which is maybe not a good thing, but that I know where I'm going, that I don't need to use the phone, that I don't become a slave to technology.
Yeah. And I definitely am a slave to technology. I mean,
I know.
I will learn the route to get to like someone's house, even if it's far away. I don't my phone doesn't come out. I don't need to use it for that. But like if I was throwing a curveball, like if all of a sudden I was going that direction and all of a sudden it said like road closed ahead, I'd just panic. You know what I mean? And like it's like if I'm going to like visit my mom like up in the north woods of Wisconsin and I don't get reception up there, I'd be done. I'd just be done. I'd be like, I don't know where I'm going.
I know. I want to help me help you.
Yeah. So again, this concept came up a lot as we were going through this, and all of this, as any inquisitive listener will know, obviously speaks in the spiritual life. If you're just kind of aimlessly walking around when it comes to spiritual life with no real goal, no real end in mind, that being holiness and heaven, what are you doing? You know, I mean, like where are you even going then? You know, it's like. How do you know what it is you're doing is good or bad? I don't know. You had a smirk on your face.
You don't.
There, Father.
You don't know. That's exactly. No, I don't know. Just you made me think of like this, like at a press conference or something. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing out there? Exactly. It's like you imagine like in any sports team, if they didn't know, I guess that involves like a team sport, football, basketball, whatever. That I mean, if you don't even know what you guys are doing, if you have to come together, you got to know everyone's role. You have to know everybody's responsibility, a job assignment, and like that's how things happen. So part of this is point us in that right direction to the goal. We want to go to the end line, pay dirt, you know, they call it pay dirt touchdown, right? So that's where we want to go. We want to go to pay dirt, which is heaven.
Where's pay dirt come from? I've never heard of that before.
So in the game of football, right, you want to score.
I'm familiar.
You want to score, right? A touchdown, 6 points. You want to get in
the more a home run.
The more you touchdowns you score, presumably the more you would get paid because you'd be a better athlete, right? Oh. So they call that pay dirt. You want to get to the end zone because the more successful you are,
I get paid.
Because the more successful you are, the more likely you'll get paid. That's why they call it pay dirt.
That makes sense.
Good.
Yeah, I'm happy we could come together and figure that out together. But yeah, so that's going to be all of this. So we're going to be having conversations, topics, people, all of these things that are going to explore for what it's worth. When we talk about holiness, it's a pretty open concept, right? I mean, like if we told you we're going to have that our next show is going to be on the church, I mean, that could go in 15 million different directions, right? I mean, like the church, like church history. You guys are talking about the ecclesiology, the structure, the hierarchy. What are you going to talk about? It's like there's so many things. So even when we say holiness, like that's the goal, your mind should go to a place of, well, that seems kind of broad, right? And that's intentional, right? Because the path to holiness, first and foremost, is found in the church, is found in the sacraments, in the Catholic Church. But there's a huge array to get there. I mean, any person who even just picks up minor study of Catholicism sees that, right? I mean, because you can have the kind of the Pauline way to holiness, like this kind of this moment of grace of the Lord appearing. You can have the kind of the Augustinian one of like this more intellectual conversion through time. You could take like the John of the Cross, really like the mystical route, of all these things speak to the individual person, but also speak to the good of the whole church. And that's kind of the beauty of the church itself, that there's so many branches, I guess. I don't know the right analogy to that. The holiness and the theology of the church is like an ocean, right? Like you can stand on the shore and dip your toes in it, or you can go drown in the deep end. Like there's just like there's so much. Like there's just so much content.
We want you to drown, everybody.
We want you to,
let that be known. We want you to drown.
We're gonna get you to heaven one way or another. But
I always like the image. I guess I've kind of heard of like a mountain, right? I mean, a mountain's a very biblical image. That's where God reveals himself, going back to Abraham, Moses, Jesus on Mount Tabor. Everybody wants to get to the top. Like, that's what we're all going for. But I guess, you heard the saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to climb up a mountain. And that's sort of like, though we're going for the same goal, the paths we take are going to differ. Some might just go just straight up, just elevation, just right to the top. Some might do sort of like a switchback type thing, right? So that might be more the Augustinian. So I'm getting there slowly but surely. Some kind of go right to the top. Some maybe are just take a helicopter to the top. No, you can't. You can't just take a helicopter to the top. You can't just,
That's cheating.
That's cheating.
That's like in The Lord of the Rings. No, they can't just fly the eagles to Mordor and drop it in there. That's not how that works.
I know. It's like, thou shalt not pass. Anyway, but there's more than one way to go up that mountain, and that's the same thing. Though we're all striving for holiness, that's the goal for everybody. The path we take is going to differ, which is maybe a little bit more of the particular vocation that each of us call. The path of a married man is different than the path of a religious sister. All shooting for the same thing, that we're all going for the top, but it's going to look different.
And we're going to be talking about those particular vocations in this. That's not going to be lost on us. We're not just going to take a 30,000-foot view every time we talk about holiness, but we also want to keep it open to this idea of I'll talk about my marriage, and we'll have people talk about marriage on the podcast. We'll have priests that we can talk about what it means to be a priest and how that helps them, how they came to know that vocation, how they live it out to this day. We'll have sisters. We will hopefully we have some. We're lucky enough in Diocese of Green Bay to have Eastern Rite monks, Byzantine Rite monks who live in St. Nazianz, which is really close to us. And hopefully we can get a monk on here to talk about the Eastern Rite of the Church, and also the monastic life, and both those things. So we're going to keep a 30,000-foot view on holiness, but also we're going to speak about the particular vocations, and hopefully those stories, those conversations will help you to just discern better in your own life. Like if you hear something of if you're listening to a priest speak about his vocation and you're a young man, you think, wow, like that sounds exactly like my story, or like that's beautiful and I want that. Or if you're a young woman, you hear a sister talking about what it means to be a sister and how she speaks about the Lord, and you're like, oh, my heart just is moved by that. Or if you're a young person who is open to marriage, just hearing about what marriage all entails and like what that takes, and the ups and downs, and what you're saying yes to, that hopefully energize you. Or maybe you'll say to you, I don't think God's calling me to that. So we're going to take that kind of big view of holiness, of that you are called to holiness, yes, but how, right? So where are you going? Quo Vadis, holiness. You're going to heaven. But how are you called there? Well, that's going to be your particular vocation. So hopefully the conversations that we have will first and foremost enrich you spiritually, will help you just grow closer to the Lord, because that is how you are going to, you're both going to get to holiness, but also your particular vocation through the Lord. There's just no way around it.
And just another thing to throw out there, because we kind of swim in this world of vocations and some of the terminology and stuff like this. And you brought up the word to discern, which is kind of a particular term. Most people probably have a sense of it. To discern is to sort of, look at, contemplate, meditate, look, where the Lord is. But sort of interesting, because I love etymology. I'm not a huge language person, but it's great for homilies to look at, like, what does that word mean?
It's fascinating.
It is. And the verb discern comes from the Latin. Again, I had an instructor. He would talk about, like, he'd throw in Latin, Latin terms. He'd be like, "Are you guys gonna get a half credit of Latin as well at the top of whatever this was?" But it comes from the Latin discernere, which means actually to cut off. Like that's what it means, to cut off. We usually think of discerning of like, okay, here are the options, I'm gonna choose one. Well, rather discern.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Yeah, right. For whatever reason, my mind went to Duck, Duck, Goose. Then I don't know. You know what they call it in Minnesota? Duck.
Gray duck.
Gray duck.
Isn't that so weird?
Weird.
Minnesotans.
Weird.
If you're a listener, we love you. But
we love you. Yeah, I know a lot of people in Minnesota. But it means to cut off. So it's not just you choose from these like platter of options, but rather it's like as you discern, it's like, you know what? You delve into it and be like, you know what? This wasn't it. And you cut it off. And that's it. You know? That's sort of the beauty of like, you know, like religious life. You can go and do a come and see weekend, right? You can live the life. And not that you'll know definitively when you're done, but you'll definitely have a better sense of it. That you're like, you know what? I didn't feel at home here. I'm not sure this is what I thought it was. And you can discern that and cut it off. Like, okay, that's not it. I mean, diocesan priesthood, I mean, you can always shadow a priest and know that their days are always sort of, you never
Can you
quite
really
know.
shadow a priest?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Why not?
I didn't know that.
What do you-
That's awesome.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
You just like call them up. Hey man, can I shadow you this week? Like for a day, and like you pick a day. And I'm just gonna cart around with you for a full day.
Yeah. I mean,
Has that happened to you?
I mean,
officially happened, like
not
where
officially.
someone's been like,
No, not
I'm
officially.
gonna watch you today.
I've told people, like, all right, you're coming along with me. We're doing this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that happened to me. Yeah.
You know. So I mean, because it's good to see. I mean, because in particular, I mean, diocesan priesthood. I mean, it could be the same case. I guess I'm just coming from my experience and perspective, but I mean, every day is just so different. Yeah. I mean, it's just, which is the beauty of it, I think, is that you never know what it's, I mean, you should know, but still things happen, right? You get this call here. Hey, I got to go. I got that yesterday, an anointing. You know, it's just sort of like you just, yep, here we go. Hop and jump in the car and giddy up. So
I should add that to our website, like a
shadow a priest.
Yeah, a request form for shadow a priest. Send it out to the priest in the area.
Yeah. We get some takers, I'm sure.
I bet you would.
Yeah.
I would have done it in high school. That'd been fun. Yeah. It's like shadowing a cop. I mean, but different.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Priest is more exciting. What are you laughing at? But you know, but same thing too. If people are open to, you know, marriage and they're dating someone and it's like, you know, this isn't, oh, then you discern that, you cut that off. Okay, this wasn't the person, you know, because here I'm going back to old man here. You know, the one thing that kind of, people are like, I'm discerning marriage. Like, you don't discern marriage.
No,
you don't discern marriage.
You discern marriage with a person.
With a person.
With a person.
Yes.
Yeah. You that's always been one of my pet peeves too. Is like if I'm talking, especially when working in high school, if someone said to me like, oh, I know I'm called to marriage, but that person is not currently dating anybody. That makes zero sense. Like, how can you be called to marriage, but like you're called to the idea of marriage? That doesn't make any sense. Like you're called to marry this particular person, and then you know that person is your new way to holiness, right? Is the way you're going to achieve salvation, or I mean it's through Christ, but that person's going to help you achieve that. So yeah, that was bothering me too. Like improper usage of the terms. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, on a marriage podcast sometime. But
yeah, I suppose.
And I do that. I don't think there should be a. I don't think there should be a shadow a marriage day. That might be kind of weird.
We should put that on the website.
Shadow a married couple, like they just like hanging out in your house all day, just watching you. That's the creepiest thing I've said in a long time. I'm so sorry for people who are now visualizing that and are getting creeped out themselves because that.
Spend a day with the Geigers.
No.
You have a guest room. I mean, what more do you want? Like. He's got all the Claire Brune you can drink.
Yeah.
LaCroix.
That's sparkling water, people. Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I do have a lot of sparkling water in my house. Trying to get off the soda.
But it's a good alternative.
It is.
I'm a big fan. I'm not tied to any particular brand because the sales just jump from one thing to the next. So if LaCroix is on sale, bubbly.
I have bubbly in my house right now.
That's on sale. I'll get
stuff.
that. I'm not picky.
Yeah.
I am not picky.
No. And apparently we're not very picky on the conversation topics for this podcast because now we're talking about sparkling water. So welcome to the Sparkling Water Podcast where we answer all of your sparkling water questions.
Coconut's my favorite.
Ew. No. All right. Well, that was a fun live podcast because that was the gross thing I've heard in a long time. So, yeah. So talking about all of these things, I mean, like there is, as you can tell, we have a lot to say. we also have a lot of topics to talk about. There are so many things. And ultimately, we want to help you grow in holiness. That's why we're doing this. We want to have conversations with and for you guys about what it means to grow in holiness. How do we do that both in the 30,000-foot view, but also in the particular sense? And so we're going to be doing that. And that's mostly going to be Father Mark and myself, that we're going to be the main, not only host, but also the people on this podcast. We're also going to have guests with us. So we have a couple of guests slated to join us already. So next week, we're going to have Bishop David Ricken, who's the Bishop of the Diocese of Green Bay, joining us. And I didn't know this, but apparently he was the vocation director for Pueblo, Colorado, correct? So where he was previously before this. I didn't know that. So we're going to have him to talk about what that was like for him, the changes in the culture that he's seen around the priesthood and how people discern and where people are at, and how that all works. I want to talk to him about the vocation crisis that we face in the church right now, even in this particular diocese, but also as a universal church. And he also instituted the Year of St. Joseph for Diocese of Green Bay. What month did that start in? Do you remember now?
Yes, I remember.
Okay,
March 19th is feast day, you knucklehead.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, March
that
19th.
That's embarrassing. So that's
all right.
But we've been in a pandemic, so it's kind of a weird time to have a Year of St. Joseph because
so
stay home, everyone.
Bishop kicked it off at the St. Joseph Chapel, which is the chapel on the diocesan grounds of the Diocese of Green Bay. It was me and him and a camera. That's how we kicked off the year, because we were sort of already in the midst of it. So it was sort of, it was too bad, because I felt like the year never really got started because of this pandemic. But we continue to pray. In particular, if you've seen any of the seminarian materials that we put out about our guys, the prayer card that we chose for this year, the prayer, is sort of that third part of the prayer to St. Joseph. With Mary, you raised Jesus the high priest. You know our need for priests. Send us good and holy priests from our families to serve the people of our diocese. May our children and grandchildren hear and say yes to the call of Jesus, just as you and Mary did. It was all from memory.
That was good.
Yeah.
Ah, wow.
I pray it.
That's inspiring.
But that's what we're praying for in particular, for more yeses. Because the Lord is calling, but we need people to respond and say yes. So, like I said, this is hopefully steering young folk into the direction of where the Lord wants them to be.
Yeah. And I think that the conversation with Bishop Ricken next week, will be interesting. The questions I kind of came up with in my head to ask him already, but I have a feeling kind of like this. It's just going to go off on our own thoughts about things. And Bishop Ricken is a good and holy man. He's very wise, and I think he's going to have a lot of really important things to say to you guys. And from that point on, we'll have different guests. We have a lot of different religious orders in our diocese that we hope to be able to get as guests to come on. I'm hoping that maybe once a month, that's kind of the goal, is to get a priest in our diocese to come on and just share his vocation story. What were the books he read that helped inspire his vocation? Who were the people who helped walk with him, and why was that helpful? So all of those things are going to be part of this. And the goal of this podcast is to help you understand the end in mind. And the end is heaven, is holiness. And so we're going to have conversations and guests to help aid in that process. So, Father Mark, any closing thoughts for the good of the people?
No, this was a long time coming. This is a little surreal. This is a little surreal to be honest. So
very surreal. No,
it's exciting. So we're off and running.
We are. It took a long time too. A lot of different pieces of equipment, a lot of learning curve stuff. As I'm doing this all on my own, trying to figure out how
this isn't going to happen often, but I do commend you.
Wow.
A lot of hard work went into this. A lot of perseverance. A lot of resolve.
Wow.
So
a lot of YouTube videos.
Praise the Lord for YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. But it's quite helpful. But I tip my hat to you.
Thank you. I have this on recording now, so
I know
I'm gonna listen to this every night before I go to bed to remind myself of my dignity and goodness. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very Moana moment. Have you seen Moana?
No.
Never mind. All right. Well, when you come over sometime, we'll watch Moana. Don't you worry. It'll be great. The Rock is in it. He plays Maui. Like,
if you smile.
And he sings. He sings in it. The Rock. He's super good too.
I'm sure he is.
He's talented.
He's a talented man.
Talented man. Again, This is getting off the.
All right, we need to wrap this up.
We need to wrap it up.
Well,
thank you guys very much for tuning in this week, for listening to us. We will be back next week with Bishop David Ricken to talk about his time as vocation director, where he sees all this stuff going in the world and how we can better be discerning our own vocation. in the future, as of right now, we don't know exactly what day this will be released on, and every week though,
it's a nice disclaimer.
My goal is to have a specific day of the week this podcast comes out. But as we just talked about, I'm learning a lot of this on the fly, so be patient as we figure that out. But we look forward to being able to walk with all of you and help you grow in holiness. So you should be able to find this podcast wherever you get your podcast, that be Stitcher, or that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. It should be on all those platforms here very soon. So thank you very much for listening and for joining us, and may you always keep the end in mind.
Amen.
Do you like that?
Amen.